Crystal Tower information, Whiskey 2153 Zulu, wind 060 at 5.
076 Mike Juliet, departure radar contact.
Hazardous weather information from Minnesota available on flight service frequency.
You've dialed in the Flying Midwest podcast, connecting aviators from across America's heartland, sharing news, information, and events from around the region.
Calling Nancy 53 on over tower, roger, turn left heading 070, runway 9er, clear for takeoff.
Sit back, relax, and join our crew for some hangar talk as we discuss a wide variety of regional aviation topics.
Archer 71143, flying flag, runway 28 left, quick takeoff, left hand southbound first.
And now, from our home at the Anoka County Blaine Airport, our checklist is complete, and we're ready for departure for another episode of the Flying Midwest podcast.
Contact departure on your flight.
Welcome, everyone, to the Flying Midwest podcast. I am Jim, one of your hosts. Happy to be joined by my co-host, Maddie.
Hello.
And the one and only Badger Pilot.
Hey, guys.
In this space is something to talk about before we get into the episode. I think at least two of us have something to say about annual inspections on aircraft. So, Badger, what do you got?
I don't know yet because my first annual as an airplane owner is next month, and I'm a little nervous. I'm super nervous. I know a lot of what I'm expecting, and I know that your first couple of annuals as an owner are generally more on the pricey side compared to what they eventually mellow out to be. But I did get a pre-buy inspection, so I know some of the squawks in there. The fear of the unknown, though, is what has me holding my breath. So we'll see what next month has to bring.
I mean, that's fair. How long do they think it's going to take for yours?
I don't know if I'm going to have it done before Oshkosh. I'm wishy-washy about whether I'm driving or driving, then driving home just to fly up to Oshkosh. I think I'm just going to plan on driving because I don't know what the annual is going to bring.
Yeah, you might as well prepare to drive just in case something weird does pop up in the annual and you've got to have the aircraft down for a hot minute.
Right. You've had an interesting annual that makes me a little nervous about mine, haven't you?
A little bit, but it turns out that the issue that we were having isn't as big of a deal as originally we thought. We had some unanticipated engine issues that just needed a little bit further inspection. So we've got on our field, we've got a pretty good shop that came and took a look. They put the scope in the cylinders and all that stuff and gave us the blessing to put things back together. We're going to just take some precautionary steps on our own to just check the engine again in 25 hours, see how things are doing. It passed all the compression checks. It's been running fine before the annual. So the pros say, give it a shot, fly it for 25 hours and reassess. So that's what we're going to do. But when we put everything back together and got ready to check things out, the right mag failed. So we now are working on that. It turns out it was a grounding issue, and that has now since been resolved, and everything's now running fine. So I haven't flown it yet. This is today years old, this information. So the plane is going to be back up and ready to fly again. So I'm excited to get back in the air, but I'll be gone for the next week, so I can't fly anyway. So that's just part of aircraft ownership, having the annual and the anticipation of what could possibly be wrong with this plane, even though you've been flying it and everything's felt fine. What's the little hidden thing that might come up? So I think we're pretty fortunate that things played out the way that they did. We'll be due for engine overhaul in a year and a half anyway. So that's an expense that's coming that we're planning for. So there we go.
It's kind of nice that the timing at least is at a time when you wouldn't be able to fly anyway. So I'd have a nightmare scenario in my mind that something will come up right before a big trip or something.
Right. Yeah, and the only thing I have planned is just working towards the CFI stuff. I rejoined the flying club that I started with just before the annual, just because I'd like to eventually work towards being a more active member there, possibly instructing there some days. So I rejoined the club. So it's not like I've been without aircraft the entire time that I've been having the Sundowner and annual. So, Matt, did you have any fun and exciting news? Anything going on with you?
I mean, I had an emergency, but it wasn't in there.
What? Oh.
My engine overheated, and it felt very procedural. I'm like, oh my God.
In your car?
In my truck, yeah. So
Okay.
another $1,500 on my truck. Hey, but the engine is fine because of my quick thinking and pulling over. So even though my sister's like, you should drive it home, I'm like, no.
Do you run any checklists?
I felt like I needed to, and then I realized there were no checklists. So I just sat there and wait for a tow truck.
Okay. It sounds like you took the correct action to divert, at least. So you diverted it off of the highway, and then you troubleshot the problem.
Were you at least on top of the hill to simulate a best glide?
I took off the gas and I threw my hazards on. I guess that's about as good as I could do.
Okay. Did you squawk anything by chance?
I didn't. I may have squawked, like, verbally.
That was the perfect answer. I didn't even try to set you up for that. Beautiful. Well, that's a bummer. We're sorry that you had that emergency experience, but glad that you came out on the other side of it.
That is okay. Truck's all good. It's back home. I'm back home. We're all good.
So even for you, we're talking about some sort of maintenance issue, even though it's not an airplane.
It's okay. I'm in it financially with you guys.
All right. There we go.
There you go.
All right. Now that we've talked about all sorts of mechanical woes and anxieties, what have we got coming up on this episode, Mr. Badger?
I am super excited for this. We have Rich Wellner on this episode. For those not familiar, Rich is a YouTuber flying around Wisconsin and really around the whole country and other parts of the world too. But he has a very unique outlook on his YouTube channel where I kind of refer to it as the overlanding channel for aviation, where it's a couple minutes of flying and then he gets into his camping setup and gets into some really cool recipes for camping and flying to campsites and cooking at his campsites, all while incorporating aviation. And he's also had some really cool business adventures, and we'll get into some of that during this interview.
Yes, we will. I've had a chance to meet Rich a couple times now. He is just an all-around good dude, too. So I'm excited to have him on the podcast.
Awesome.
Me too. And we have a big announcement embedded into this episode.
So no skipping through parts that you might find boring because you might miss the announcement.
So before our interview with Rich, first, we need to complete our pilot quarters sectional showdown.
We sure do. Brought to you by the good people over at Pilot Quarters, making your next favorite flying shirt.
Check them out at pilotquarters.com.
So this is yours, Badger. You presented this.
I'm working.
This is your idea. You are responsible for the comments that come with it.
Oh boy, here we go. There are some good ones. There's some good answers in here. I like this. Okay.
Well, are you going to share them with everybody else?
Yeah, okay. All right. So we went away from the traditional sectional map and went to the VFR Flyway map, and specifically around Chicago, O'Hare, and the airspace there. So it's in kind of the northwest quadrant of the Flyway chart.
I thought this was some sort of waterfall or something because of what appears to be a river runs through it.
And Maddie, what did you say about it?
I don't.
Was it something about a knife or something stabby?
I'm not looking at the picture. Hold on.
So it's funny you say something about a knife or something stabby, because Jeff Padden commented that it's a new butter knife symbol that was added next to his home airport because of all of his buttery smooth landings. Nice work, Jeff.
Nicely done, Jeff.
Ed Becerra, our friend Ed from the Flying Stampede, had 2 comments on this. One of them is that he used to live right by there, so he knows what it is. But his non-serious guess was it's a new water slide at the Wisconsin Dells.
That's good.
And then I'm going to assume that Rodney Brown knows the answer, because his response is, this is on the Chicago Flyway chart, and I'm not going to be a spoiler for all the guesses, so I won't say what it is. That's a hint that he knows the answer. And what I'm guessing his answer would have been is that it is a ski hill.
So is this supposed to be like a visual reference point as you're coming into an airport in that area then? Or
I believe so.
Point?
I think so. I mean, it's VFR, as in Visual Flight Rules, Flyway symbol. Yeah, navigating with the more pronounced visual aids along the route. So there you go. It's a ski hill.
That's an interesting symbol. I never would have guessed that.
Never guessed that.
So I am going to get more specific, because it's not just a ski hill. I stumped myself.
Jump, isn't it?
It's a ski jump. Now, why they have like bubbles rolling around it, I don't know, but
See, I thought that was like rapids at the bottom of a waterfall. So
yeah,
my guess wasn't that far off.
or for like when you fall into a fresh pile of snow and it just poofs up around you.
Oh yeah, that could be it too.
That's what would happen for me because I would. Hopefully, Jim, you have something a little more exciting than that.
I can't promise I do, but here's what we're gonna do on this one. This is a suggestion that was passed along to me by our friend Ted over at the Midlight Pilots podcast. So we're going to use this one on this episode to see if I can get it to you. For those of you following along, you can find this image on our Facebook page. You can take a look at that. You can make all kinds of guesses, sarcastic or not. We'll read some of those on the next episode. So, all right, class, I'm sharing my screen with you. On this sectional here, this is the area near Duluth, Minnesota. What we're going to focus on this episode, though, is this symbology near Superior, Wisconsin. East of the Richard Bong Airport is a blue dot and some letters. We have, I don't know if that's an FL or an FI, and a G next to it. So let's speak on it. What do you got? What are your guesses?
Maddie, do you know what it is?
I'm just going to go with the answer that those are fig harvesting plants.
Like plants is in factories or plants is in like a plant coming out of the ground?
As in the manufacturing location.
All right, so like if I'm looking for some fig Newtons, this is the place for us to go and do like our heist movie to collect the fig Newtons.
That makes sense, though, because if you look a little bit to the west of it, there's a black dot that says stacks, and that must be where they stack their harvest. So,
We are truly the best pilots.
We sure are. So is that also your guess, Badger, because of the stacks of the stacking location?
you know what? I'm going to double down on it. Not just any figs. Yeah, we'll double down. Figs.
Double it down on the figs. All right, we're going to post a photograph of this in our Facebook page. So just north of the word Superior is what you're looking for, the FI or FL, depending on if you think that's a capital I or a lowercase l, with a space and then a G. Check that out on our Facebook page if you have a guess. And thank you to our friends over at Pilot Quarters for sponsoring the sectional showdown. Check them out, pilotquarters.com.
Good shirts.
So in our last episode, we put out a call to action for some new reviews, and you guys responded, and we appreciate it.
Thanks a bunch.
Thanks a bunch of figs. And we did get a couple of new reviews in, so we certainly appreciate that. This one is simply titled New Listener. 5 stars, of course. It says, this podcast was recently shared with me. I like the format and the regional focus on the Midwest. There's a good mix of local topics and a broad aviation interests. I like the collection of hosts and the varying backgrounds that they bring. And this was submitted to us from JB Mitt. So thank you, JB Mitt, for your very kind words in your review and, of course, the 5-star rating.
Hey, and whoever shared it with you, thanks for that, too. Every little bit helps spread the word about the podcast, so we appreciate that, too. What do you say we get into some news and events?
That sounds good.
I just watched that Blue Angels documentary, which caused me to watch. It is good. You should watch it. In the spirit of that, I also watched a different one from, I don't know, a number of years before. To bring us to the news and events, I was going to take one of their lines and just go, ready, hit it.
So let's get the news out of the way from Illinois, and even more so out of the way because it's another story about eVTOLs. We've talked in the past about eVTOLs with Joby Aviation, and there is a new competitor out of Illinois called Archer Aviation, who was just granted their Part 135 certification from the FAA for their new 4-passenger eVTOL aircraft called Midnight. The Midnight is modeled very closely to its demonstrator aircraft called the Maker, which can fly up to 60 miles at top speeds of 150 miles an hour. And the Midnight has extended that range to 100 miles. Even though it can range 100 miles, they're looking for more of the shorter trips. Archer has also announced that they're partnering with automarker Stellantis to produce hundreds of these electric air taxis. So it looks like there's a little bit of competition now in the eVTOL world, and it's all coming from the Midwest.
Minnesota becomes the second state to permit flying cars on public roadways. There are a couple of these flying cars, legally known as roadable aircraft, that are now allowed on Minnesota roads. So the other state is New Hampshire. They already did this, but Governor Tim Walz actually just recently signed this in. It was a bipartisan transportation bill package. So if you just want to drive yourself to a strip and take off, great. However, you cannot, unless it is emergency, take off or land on a public roadway, which, sorry, Jetsons fans, not as exciting. You do have to have at least a sport pilot license. It's interesting to see these things finally roadworthy.
I really think they missed the mark with what they call it, like roadable aircraft. That's
Leave it to the government to make the goofiest legal names for things.
I mean, there's got to be a cooler name. I think what we need to do now is make it a flying amphibious car so we conquer air, land, and sea.
It's the triathlon vehicle.
There you go. We're talking about Hartzell Propellers, who is introducing a new program for purchasing of serviceable used propeller cores directly from aircraft owners. This new program's main goal is to reduce overhaul lead times, but it will have a secondary effect, of course, of giving customers more buying options, as well as the opportunity to save money in the process. Customers can actually reduce the price of their new or used Hartzell propeller by selling their existing serviceable propeller, as long as Hartzell makes a propeller for them. Of course, these propellers on trade-in, for lack of a better term, would have to have a complete logbook and history, the applicable certificates, and the recorded time since new. As an additional bonus, apparently Ohio has sales tax advantages to this by exempting sales tax on maintenance and repair work performed at the Hartzell Service Center, which, of course, is at the Piqua Airport. I'm probably still saying that wrong, but the identifier is India 17. So if you have a Hartzell and you want to trade it in for a new Hartzell, you can now trade in the core and get a discount. Moving over to Kalamazoo, Michigan, the home of the very popular Air Zoo Aviation Museum. Over the last 10 years, they've been working, actually more than 10 years, on restoring an FM-2 Wildcat that spent almost 70 years in the bottom of Lake Michigan. The project to restore the plane cost almost $700,000. That's an estimate. And probably even more impressive, 50,000 hours of work put into the plane to get it back into showroom quality. A little bit of history about the plane. It was actually cut in half by the propeller of the aircraft carrier it was supposed to land on. But when the engine seized, the plane crashed into the water. And thankfully, the pilot was okay. But the plane sat in the bottom of Lake Michigan from December 18th, 1944 until December 7th, 2012. So quite a bit of time, almost 70 years, if my math is right. It's probably not, but darn close. At the bottom of Lake Michigan. The museum president and CEO, Troy Thrash, said that when he first saw the plane after it resurfaced, he thought it would never look like a plane again because it was in such disrepair. And his team of restorers are quoted as saying, "Dude, chill, we got this." And sure enough, the plane is back to showroom quality. The article does not say whether it'll be a static display or an actual living, breathing, flying airplane. I have to imagine probably just a static display. But all said and done, now that it's completed, it is being moved to the American Heritage Museum in Hudson, Massachusetts. Huge kudos to a team from Michigan of putting all of that time and all of that effort and all that money into restoring a piece of history. Hey, Jim.
What's up?
Before you get into the usual events, can I highlight an event we have coming up?
You know what? I'll take my wallet. Go ahead.
So I got in touch today with the Milwaukee TradeCon and scheduled a tour of the tower, the radar facility, and I'm trying to get a group together for the Flying Midwest podcast to come join me. They know that it'll be a handful of people, and we're all pilots, most of us pilots, all of us aviation enthusiasts, and so they're excited to have a group that will have a lot of insightful questions, or maybe even not so insightful, but still good questions. So if you are available Tuesday, July 9th at 10 a.m., that is when our group is scheduled for the tour. The best way to keep posted on all of that is in our Discord server. So you can email us at flyingmidwestpodcast@gmail.com to get the link for that. But if you are interested, you can email either flyingmidwestpodcast@gmail.com with your legal name and date of birth, or you can email me, thebadgerpilot@gmail.com with that information. That's the information that they need in order to allow you in, and we'll get a group together and go. So Tuesday, July 9th, 10 a.m., Milwaukee Mitchell International Airport. Ooh, and before I forget too, one of the controllers there heard my email address as the lady taking the phone call was reading it back to me, and I heard him yell across the room, "I know that guy, I listen to the podcast." So shout out to Randy. Thanks for listening to the podcast. And
Ready?
And we look forward to meeting you in person and seeing you on July 9th.
Yeah, buddy. All right, so first and foremost, let's talk about the one elephant in the room of events this time around, and that is the Father's Day pancake breakfast. If I were to sit here and list off every Father's Day pancake breakfast occurring in the Midwest region, you'd be sitting here for probably about 4 hours, and by the time you got done listening to the events, all of them would be over. So, I suggest check out all your local EAA chapters, check out your the Facebook pages and groups for aviation communities in your state, and check out some of those Father's Day fly-in pancake breakfasts. There are a ton of them, and they're always a good time. So I will leave it at that as opposed to spending 4 hours reading events. On to some air shows happening in the region. June 21st and 22nd at the Wausau Downtown Airport will be the Wings Over Wausau event. That event will include a professional air show, which will feature the U.S. Army Golden Knights parachute team. They also have a couple of night performers that they're going to have throughout the course of the event. Information for that is going to be at wausauevents.org. We'll put a link for that in our show notes as well. Coming up next is the 33rd Annual Quad City Air Show in Davenport, Iowa. That will occur June 22nd and 23rd. They will have concerts. They will have a military air show. They will have highlight music and fireworks. Featuring country music legend Aaron Tippin. One of the performers that they will have is Captain Sam Raz Larson, who is the pilot of the F-22 Raptor demonstration team. A little bit of foreshadowing about that individual, and I'll leave it at that. They'll also have a number of warbird and military static displays for you to check out, in addition to the action in the sky. So you can check out that event, quadcityairshow.com. Next, at the Dayton Airport, the 50th Annual Dayton Air Show in Dayton, Ohio. That's June 22nd and 23rd as well, if you're in that region. And that one's going to feature a team that we talked about a little bit ago. The United States Navy Blue Angels will be performing at that event. So, and if your kids are not as into airplanes as you are, they have the Centerpoint Energy Kids Hangar. That is a special place where kids can dig in a huge sandbox, enjoy face painting, crafts, playing on a backyard gym, and a lot of other stuff. There will also be opportunities to meet some of the airshow performers as they stop by that kids hangar to sign autographs for their littlest of fans. More information on that event, DaytonAirShow.com. Our final event is going to be at the National Cherry Festival in Traverse City, Michigan, where they will also feature a team that we may have just talked about, the United States Navy Blue Angels. They will be there from June 29th and 30th. Air show starting at approximately 1 p.m. The Blue Angels will plan on taking the skies at around 3 p.m. If you're not able to attend the air show itself, there will be a practice in the area on Friday, June 28th from 1 until 4 p.m. Obviously, that's not going to be, you can come hang out on the grounds and check out the air show, but they'll be in the area. There will also be opportunity to meet the team at the open ramp portion of the show. More information on that event is at cherryfestival.org, and then if you just go to events and down to their air show tab, it will have all kinds of frequently asked questions and information. Alrighty, with all that stuff out of the way, I think it's time to jump into the meat and potatoes of this episode.
Speaking of meat and potatoes, there's going to be cooking.
Oh, we're talking about cooking. This is perfect.
Cooking in this episode. Meat and potatoes works.
Meat and potatoes works. I love it.
All right, let's do it. What's your catchphrase now?
I don't know. I didn't like it, so we're not doing it ever again. I don't even remember what I said.
From the thing, the movie.
What thing?
The Blue Angels movie.
Ready, hit it. Are we going to do that now every time? We have a transition? Now we have to?
Yeah.
All right, well, someone else can do
Dirty
it.
aviation
I just did it last time.
You're the boss. You're the boss.
I'm the boss. Okay. All right. See you, boss.
Do we need goofy nicknames now? Matt's already got his.
I already have a goofy nickname.
He has a goofy regular name too, but we don't get into that. All right, so let's jump into this episode's interview with Rich Wellner. Ready? Hit it.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Rich Wellner. We're super excited to have you here.
Yeah, great to be here.
So I know you've been following the podcast for a little while. I'm sure you've heard at least the first 30 seconds of our episodes and how they go. So Jim's going to take it away with our Fast Five, or kind of rapid fire, spontaneous questions. And they are called the Fast Five, but you're more than welcome to elaborate on some of your
As long as we're not like Piper Cub 5. We should be fine.
Yeah, so. Exactly. So Jim, take it away.
Alrighty. Question number 1, sir. What is your favorite landing surface? Paved, grass, gravel?
Well, I guess we're going to talk about this more once we get into the meat of what I'm here for. But yeah, it would have to.
We sure are, but
yeah, it would have to be grass. I mean, I don't have much use for pavement specifically, and it's kind of a shame that so many people are scared to do anything but it.
Well, and if I hadn't taken a leap of faith and gone to a grass runway, you and I wouldn't have met. So there's that. All right, question number 2. In your opinion, ugliest aircraft you have ever seen? You can feel free to say Brian Turner's.
Actually, the ugliest aircraft and my favorite aircraft are the same. So I would be very, very happy to get a Pilatus Porter and spend a lot of time in the backcountry with one of those birds. That's so ugly, not even its mother can love it.
Pilatus, like the PC-12 is the most beautiful thing. And then there's the Porter. And it's like, what happened there? But they're so awesome that it's like, okay, well, I guess I can't say anything about it.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that they came from the same shop.
Exactly. They look nothing alike.
All right, question number 3 for you, sir. If you could own one aircraft and you don't have to worry about costs or maintenance costs or fuel costs, any of that, what would it be?
Well, normally I would answer that with the Porter again, but I've already used that answer, so I will go let's go with a Caravan, because that would also be good for my mission.
Answer. Question number 4. Favorite aviation movie?
Oh, that's a good one. Favorite aviation movie. And I've heard you ask that one before. Let's go with Airplane. I'm just a sucker for that stuff.
I love it. That's my favorite answer.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you haven't heard that one before.
Yeah, but it doesn't get old. I love that movie. I've tried to watch it with my son, and he's not digging it, but he just doesn't understand it.
It's so dumb.
It is. It's so dumb, but that's what makes it so great, I think. So, all right. And our final question you have 100% heard before. So we typically round out our questions with this. If you could be anyone in aviation, dead or alive, who would it be?
I'm going to go with, well, I've met him, but I haven't spent time with him, so I'm going to go with Sean Tucker.
Okay.
Which is not my kind of flying in general. But the one occasion that I did have to shake his hand and say hi, he was just like super affable, super great. And
sure,
man, he was good at what he did.
Well, great. All right. Well, thank you for playing along with our Fast 5 questions. With that, I think we'll jump over to Maddie for the main portion of our interview.
Oh, boy. Me? Wow.
Yep.
All right, Rich. What got you into aviation? What's your aviation background?
Yeah, it's the classic story. Growing up, I was just one of those kids that was always staring at the sky and didn't have a family in aviation, didn't have anybody that I could lean on. So I'd never really thought of it being something that like normal people could do. I'm just barely old enough that most of the aviators were still going through the military to get their training. But then I made a career out of IT and realized that it was something that people could do. So I hired a plane to fly over our farm and take some pictures. And while I was getting that done, the guy was a CFI, and he told me that what we were doing is something that people can do. So I pretty much made my mind up then that was something that I'd like to do. And it took me about 4 or 5 years to figure out a way to get it done. But once I did, yeah, it's something that I'm super passionate about. And
so what made you go from just flying, airport to airport, runway to runway, to doing something a little bit more off-roading, if you will?
Off-roading.
Yeah, so as a family, my family, we did a lot of camping with the kids and like to get out into the wilderness and things like that. And, just like I didn't know that aviation was really an option for normal people, I definitely didn't know that backcountry airstrips existed and that was something that the nation provides in some cases, private owners provide in some cases, and it's out there. And so once I found that out, then it became very clear that I didn't want to fly in a flying club anymore. Can't take those planes into backcountry Idaho. And I knew that was something that I wanted to try to explore more. I segued into figuring out if I could buy a plane and did a bunch of investigations and research. And at the time, the Mall was the plane that people were kind of pointing to. So I had an opportunity to fly in one and really enjoyed it. The guy I bought my first plane from actually said, you don't have a tail wheel endorsement. You've never done this kind of flying before. Why don't you just come out and I'll rent you the plane and fly with my instructor and see what you think. And if you like it, then we'll do a deal. And if it's not for you, then you'll get a tail wheel endorsement and no harm, no foul. So I went out there and I trained with the guy for a while, and it was an absolute blast. It was really fun flying. We were out in Arizona, so the landscapes were pretty spectacular as well. And once we got done with that, then I made an offer on the plane and commenced my flying, camping, and cooking in earnest.
Now, I don't want to rip off any Band-Aids. Is that the aircraft that you had that was totaled?
It is, yeah. That was the one that I was just talking about in that story.
If I remember, it was like 2 Tango or something like that. There were a lot of twos in there, weren't there?
Triple 2 Tango Foxtrot.
That'd be a fun one to say on the radio too. So tell us a little bit more about that story then, of what that all entails, of had a catastrophic loss of your aircraft, what comes next.
It was in the Chicago area. It was at the Schaumburg Airport. There was a big weather system going through kind of right over O'Hare. It was weird because at the time were living, not too much south of there, maybe 5 or 6 miles south of there. Never really saw any significant weather. I knew some weather was going through, the storm warnings were going off and all that. And then I got a call an hour or two later from the airport manager letting me know that something had happened to the plane. Didn't say exactly what, but he said that at O'Hare they had clocked 85 mile an hour straight line winds, and that some things had gotten tangled up at Schaumburg. So I drove over there, and there was 2 Tango Foxtrot upside down on the ramp. What had happened is that the derecho had come through and broken the tie-down ropes. So sometimes people end up in a mess because the stakes don't hold, or because they don't know how to do a knot, or whatever. There's plenty of ways for pilots to fail at this as well. But in this case, the ropes just broke in the middle. So that happened, and then we had a crane come out to put it back on its wheels, and then the insurance company came out a few days later and looked at it and said that they weren't sure if they were going to total it or not, but they needed to get an estimate from somebody. So one of the reasons why I ended up getting a Wall, which has a fabric fuselage, is because I've got a resource in Wisconsin that is extremely good with fabric, the Johnson Brothers at the Lone Rock Airport. Little plug for them, because they make award-winning airplanes. So I didn't have any trepidation about getting a fabric-covered airplane and being able to care for it properly. So I suggested to the insurance company that we start by just sending a mess of photos up to the Johnson Brothers and seeing what their estimate came in at. And their estimate for repair came in at 150% of the insured value. So then at that point, it became a very easy decision for the insurance company.
Yeah. From your perspective, were there any big lessons learned from that? I mean, there are sometimes I imagine the circumstances of the world just are what they are, and there may not have been much more that you could have done. But did you have any lessons learned from that?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is going to be controversial. So whatever the equivalent
we love controversial
of the comments section for this. So my takeaway from this was that I want to tie down my plane pointed away from the prevailing winds. If this plane had been parked that way instead of pointed into the wind, then the wind would not have gotten under the wings and basically flown the plane off of the ropes and flipped it over. Now, the flip side to that, the pushback that I've gotten from people when I've talked this through with them, is that if you want your plane to not get turned in the wind, then you want to have it facing into the wind. And maybe that's another way to break the ropes. Maybe that's another way to put your plane at risk. But on this ramp on that day, there were only 2 planes damaged, and both of them were tail draggers pointed into the wind.
Interesting.
So then ultimately, in your search for a new plane or a replacement plane, you bought another Maul. Was there any doubt in your mind you were going to go straight to Maul again, or did you explore other planes, or what did that look like?
Yeah, I'm actually glad you asked that question because it's a fun part of the story. I was pretty sure I was going to stay in the Maul family. I know the Brent Maul. I know the people at the factory pretty well at this point. I know the community pretty well at this point. So I was pretty sure that's where I was going to stay. But, this all happened with used airplane prices getting kind of crazy. So I called the guy that I bought 2 Tango Foxtrot from just as a courtesy, because he and I had that plane for 10 or 12 years. He and I have stayed in touch and are friends. We see each other at Oshkosh every summer. And I said, hey, Chuck, I wanted you to hear it from me instead of through the grapevine. But 2 Tango Foxtrot was totaled, and it looks like I'm going to be walking for a while. And Chuck kind of laughs. He goes, yeah, I knew it had been wrecked because I've been getting phone call after phone call from people asking what happened to my plane. So Schaumburg, the airport where it was wrecked, is the base for several of the news organizations in the Chicago area. So those guys went up to the airport that next morning, to get in their choppers and fly around and do their news thing. And they see planes flipped over on the ramp and they're like, get out the camera. I guess we don't have to go flying. We've got a story right here. So my plane upside down on the ramp there after this big storm that did a whole bunch of damage was on Good Morning America, on all of the Chicago news stations, and on a few of the other national ones. So I got a call the next morning from my daughter saying, we just saw your plane on Good Morning America. What happened? So Chuck had seen it also. And I said, yeah, Chuck, it looks like I'm going to be walking for a while with the prices being what they are. And he kind of pauses and he goes, well, so it turned out he had another Maul, an experimental Maul, and he was at an age where insurance was getting expensive. He had aged out of normal insurance rates, and he was a partner in, I think, at 206. And the partnership wasn't working out super great because Chuck wanted to be in the Dakotas, I think South Dakota, and the partner wanted to be down in Georgia. So Chuck figured, I'll sell my Maul and I'll buy my partner out on the 206, and then everybody's going to be happy. Once again, as with the first time where he said, come out and train in it and see if you like it. He said basically the same thing. He said, it's experimental, so it's a little bit different from what you've been flying, but why don't you come by and check it out? We'll go flying together and hang out for a couple of days, and if you like it, make me an offer. So once again, I flew out to Chuck, flew one of his airplanes, put in an offer, and bought it from him.
So what's different about this Maul than the last one?
Yeah, so this was built by a guy who used to work for the Maul factory, and it's using a lot of Maul parts, and he was able to borrow some jigs from the factory. And the fuselage is basically a Maul M7 fuselage. One major modification was that they clipped the wings, so the wings are 6 feet shorter than the universal wing. And it's got an experimental engine. So the Mauls come in 3 flavors, either 180, 235, or 260 horsepower. This one has a Lycoming IO 540 in it that's been modified by Air Performance with high compression pistons. So it actually makes 300 horsepower. And it's got a reversible prop.
Really? That's fun.
Yep.
So for all the people out there who don't know what that is, could you explain what that does and how that impacts your flying?
So we mentioned the PC-12 earlier. That's a turboprop, right? So one of the things with an airplane like that plane makes about 13% of its power just blowing gases out of the turbine portion of the engine. And then the propeller itself, you can change the orientation of the blades so that it's creating almost no thrust, creating a bunch of thrust, or reverse it and blow thrust out the front of the prop. So this plane, my Maul, actually has a propeller that works the same way. This is something that's typically used on either turboprops or seaplanes. And it's pretty uncommon for a plane on wheels like this to have a capability like that. Okay, so the theory was with having wings that are 6 feet shorter, you're losing a lot of lift. So you're losing some slow speed performance, which is one of the things that Maul is pretty well known for. So instead of landing at about 35 to 37 knots like the old plane, this one lands at more like 52 to 55 knots. It's a pretty massive difference. So what you want to be able to do is get the plane slowed down. So you can get on the brakes, of course, like a normal airplane, but by reversing the thrust, that's like putting on another brake. So the goal was to get the same kind of short field landing performance by virtue of having the reversible prop as the stock Maul would have. And then the same thing on takeoff, he opted to put in a more powerful engine because it has to be going faster when it takes off as well. The more powerful engine gets you up to that speed in the same number of feet as a classic Maul or a factory Maul would take.
So let's circle back a little bit because you talked about flying your mission, which is to campsites and being able to cook and camp and use your plane to accomplish that. I have a friend who does a lot of overlanding, off-roading in his Jeep. And when I referred to your channel as the overlanding of the skies, he's like, I got to know who this guy is. So how did you come up with the idea of basically doing these aviation overlanding videos?
Yeah, I really like storytelling. I've done a lot of it in my professional life. I've been a consultant and a professional services guy for a lot of my career. And one of the things that I've liked about those things is doing talks for people and helping them come up to speed on new technology and things like that. And I've always been a movie buff, so I love kind of the formal kind of storytelling as well. So this was kind of a natural fit. It gave me a creative outlet for doing that kind of thing that matched well with the kind of flying that I wanted to do. Now, the downside is that YouTube is, every channel that you go to is very focused on one thing, particularly the successful channels. So having a lack of focus by doing flying, camping, and cooking has been a bit of a problem in terms of getting traction and getting people to be interested. Because I'll talk to, one of the refrains that I've heard a bunch of times is somebody will walk up to me at Oshkosh or at an airport or whatever and say, hey, yeah, you're my favorite channel. I'm there for the flying and my wife is there for the cooking. I'm like, that's great. I wish I had topics that everybody liked. But so far I haven't been able to pull that off yet. But it is a good blend of things. One of the ideas that was kind of the inspiration for it is there are a lot of camping channels out there where people go out and overland or hike. They cook something, they talk about gear, they talk about all those things. This is the only channel that's doing it in an aviation context, and I think some people are still trying to figure it out, but I'm having fun doing it.
That's what matters most, right?
That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I think beyond just like the content of it too. I mean, in the episodes of yours that I watched, some of like the B-roll video footage that you have in there, it's to me, it's impressive. Like the way you frame stuff, the way that you put not just your storytelling, but the way you're telling it with the images that you capture. So that's the nerd in me giving you the best compliment I can think of as far as your just the subtle stuff in the background that I think that a lot of people just take for granted.
Yeah, I appreciate that because a lot of work goes into that. If you've got 3 establishing shots that go into setting a scene for something, you have to drive to the hangar, get the camera out, set it up, drive back onto the road, drive to the camera that's recording you, pick the camera up, set it up again, open the hangar, then go get the camera, put it in the plane, drag the plane out. It's very time consuming. There's this old idiom in movie making, show don't tell. Doesn't really work as well on YouTube because people are used to being able to have it on in the background and listen. So you have to kind of show and tell on YouTube. But the idea of show and tell, if you adhere to that principle of showing people what's going on and letting them figure things out on their own, for the people that are watching the actual channel, it's helpful, and it seems to be something that people do like, because I've had a bunch of feedback similar to yours that you notice things like that, and it makes a difference in terms of how the story comes across.
So do you have a favorite destination for your aviation camping, or type of destination? I know you said grass strips, so bonus points if it's in the Midwest, of course.
Yeah, I'm going to give you 3 answers to that. And the third one is in the Midwest. So everybody listening can stick around until the end of the answer. So the first one is the Frank Church Wilderness in Idaho. There are some absolutely magnificent strips there, really hard to get into. It kind of separates the people that are capable of operating in an environment like that from the people who aren't. And as a result, you learn a lot. You get to talk to some interesting people. The scenery is just astounding. It's some of the most beautiful flying you could ever hope to do. Second would be the Canyonlands of Utah. I spent some time at Nokai Dome 2 years ago. I spent a week there. Because of the job that I've got, I can telecommute from anywhere. I was a very early adopter of telecommuting, so I've been doing that for 14 years now. And I spent a week at Nokai Dome with a Starlink dish and a generator and a tent, working from the middle of nowhere and just enjoying the good life and making a stunningly tasty steak. One of the best ribeyes I've ever had in my life. And yeah, we'll put that in the links or something. So those are probably the top two, or places like that. In the Midwest, though, we've got a gem of a strip. It's in the north of Lake Michigan, and it's called North Fox Island. And it is sponsored by the Recreational Aircraft Foundation. It's owned by the state of Michigan. And if people are interested, I've made 4 or 5 videos about that particular location. But what's special about it is that I think it's about an 800-acre island in the middle of Lake Michigan, and it's completely undeveloped except for a grass strip that's been carved out of the woods there. So you really, if you go there in the middle of the week like I do, so again, I'll go up there sometimes for a week at a time and telecommute from there. And if you're there in the middle of the week, you're pretty likely to just have the entire place to yourself. So that's a really amazing resource. And on weekends, other pilots will drop in, and sometimes people will camp. And everybody there, just like I was talking about with the Idaho experience, everybody who's there is there for the same reason, in pursuit of the same goals, and with the same kind of attitude about aviation and camping and all that stuff. So I've never had a time there where I wasn't happy to be there.
And I've heard a lot about this island, and I haven't made it out there yet, but I'm going to put that one on my bucket list too.
Yeah, you absolutely should. I mean, the worst time that I ever had there was just last summer. So I got there, and I was planning to stick around for a few days, and there are some shipwrecks scattered around the island. So I was going to do some snorkeling and see the shipwrecks and get some video and just kind of enjoy that experience. Forecast turned south a little bit. And then on top of that, I actually ended up with a problem getting the engine started. So I was stuck there for 5 days or something like that. Because I had my Starlink, I was messaging friends and getting advice on what could be wrong with the plane. And I knew that worst case scenario, some friends were going to come up on the weekend and we'd get things sorted out. But even that, basically off and on rain for 3 or 4 or 5 days, and being there alone was still enough to make up for the hardship, in quotation marks, of being stuck on this island.
So you had mentioned specific areas like the Frank Church Wilderness area, but then you mentioned a specific airport with North Fox Lake. For some of these other areas, are there actual airports you're flying into, or are you just finding a gravel bar that looks like, I could probably fit a campsite there, or how are you going about that?
Yeah, what I've been doing is mostly using resources from the Utah Pilots Association, I think is what they're called, as well as there's been a couple books of airstrips put out about Idaho and Utah. So I use those as my references, and I was going to say almost exclusively, I think exclusively, going into pre-established landing strips.
So I think that segues us to the next part of your flying videos, which is not just the camping and the flying, but the cooking too. Talk to us a bit about your favorite part about the cooking portion of your channel and that experience as you go out into these more remote strips.
Yeah. So the genesis of that is that it gets pretty old pretty quickly eating dehydrated meals. So I figured, well, let's eat something else then. And I've always liked to cook. So it seemed like it would be an interesting thing to do to get to these locations and cook something that's a non-traditional camping dish. So the very first one that I did was coq au vin, the traditional French dish. So I cooked that in a Dutch oven, and it turned out fabulous. I published that video, and it got picked up by a TV show. I posted it on Reddit, and some TV show was mining Reddit for interesting content, and it got picked up by that and put on TV. And I'm like, maybe I've got something here. So I continued to pursue that for a little while and kept exploring different kinds of recipes, different kinds of ideas, and trying to figure out kind of where to go with that in terms of cooking complex things like coq au vin versus things that are more accessible. I did an episode where I made Oklahoma-style smash burgers, which were the original hamburger and the original smash burger, of course. And I made, at North Fox Island, I made chicken parmesan over a campfire, and it was kind of amazing. So yeah, it's just a desire to eat better while on the road that kind of was the driving force behind that.
Now, when you're at a place like North Fox Island for a week, like you said, telecommuting, I'd imagine there has to be some preparations on what you're bringing in there, weights and balance, things like that, and just, I'm guessing, potentially spoilage too. So how do you manage that part of it?
Yeah, so part of the prep for a trip like that is to figure out what meals you're going to make on what days and what kinds of ingredients you want to try to keep food safe. So I've got a big cooler, and I'm usually traveling alone. So one of the things that a lot of people mess up is that they pack too much food and not enough ice. I can go a week on one cooler load because I only have enough food for one person, and I can fit a whole lot of ice in there. So that keeps a lot of the food safety issues at bay. But I also make different kinds of things. So I'll try to limit the number of things that need to be refrigerated. So I was cooking the other day, and I went down to Southern Illinois for the eclipse, and I thought I'll cook something during the eclipse, and that'll kill some time while we're down there. And I'm not in a big hurry to optimize things. You know, I got there a little bit early to make sure that I would be able to get in and get parked, and then I wasn't in a big hurry to leave afterwards. So wanted to make something. So I made a Vietnamese-inspired American pasta kind of a thing. And when I did the planning for that, I didn't want to have a cooler at all. So butter is pretty safe. You don't have, as long as you keep it out of the sun, you're fine. Block of Parmesan cheese, hard cheeses are fine. You don't have to worry about them going bad. And then from there was fish sauce, oyster sauce, soy sauce, dry noodles, and a jug of water. And that was everything that I needed in order to put that dish together. So people tend to think about how hard it's going to be to keep things fresh and not go back to like the roots of cooking and think about things that you don't have to pay that much attention to. I mean, butter and cheese are methods of preserving food. People think you have to keep your cheese refrigerated, you have to keep your butter refrigerated. I mean, you can definitely spoil those things, but you don't have to be too awful careful to keep them safe either. So when I do my planning, I think about things like that. Vegetables don't need to be refrigerated. You can keep them in paper bags rather, and they'll be good for several days until you get around to wanting to cook with them. It's basically, you know, things like meat that you really have to be more careful with. And if you're willing to lean into if not a vegetarian diet, at least a meat light or a protein light diet, it makes it a lot easier to keep your ingredients fresh long enough to cook with them.
Do you have a favorite camping meal that you've prepared, and can you give us some insight on how you prepare it? And on the flip side, any meals that you thought would be really good that have been a total bust?
I haven't had any total busts. It's not because I'm like a genius chef or anything like that. It's because I'm an IT guy, so I test before I go out and do anything.
Okay.
So I haven't had any busts. In terms of the best, the coq au vin, the very first one, was astoundingly good and a really good way to get out of the gate. So that was really tasty. I flew out to a buddy's farm in Ohio and stayed with him a couple days and made a meatloaf that was amazingly tasty as well, kind of on the simpler side of things. And then I guess the third one would be that ribeye that I talked about in Utah. So the backstory on that is that I spent a week there and I cooked a couple things and decided kind of midweek that I wanted to stretch my legs, as it were. So I flew into town and went to Walmart just to get some fresh ingredients. And the Walmart by me, which first of all is our only choice for grocery store, the Walmart by me only has choice. They never get prime cut meats. But I went to this Walmart in Utah and it was like 98% choice and 1 or 2 prime cuts. So I saw this prime ribeye that just looked amazing. The marbling looked like it could be better than a ribeye. Like the whole thing was misgraded and it was better quality than should have even had that label on it. So I snagged that and I got some butter and some herbs and I went back to camp and I made a compound butter. So a compound butter is just a butter with seasonings in it. And made that compound butter, cooked the steak using a camp stove with the butter in the pan. And it's probably the best meal that I've ever made at a camp, anywhere, ever, under any circumstances. It was just astounding. And then couple that with the views and the solitude and all that. Yeah, that was a good night.
I love a ribeye.
That sounds so good. Compound butter, ribeye,
Yeah, it really does.
cheese. Oh, good thing.
Yeah. Then the next morning, I had half of the compound butter left over. So I took that compound butter and I got some bread and some slices of American cheese. And I made
I know where this is going.
with the compound butter.
Yes.
And had that for breakfast. And it was stupid.
You know, we don't have to go camping, but if you want to come and cook for me, I wouldn't be opposed to it. Throw that out there.
We should do a fly-in and I'll cook for you.
You know what? That's a great idea, foreshadowing.
I like that. So Rich, changing gears a little bit, but in your videos you advertise cleaning supplies made by Plain Perfect. And I think in one video you snuck in a line that you were part of the company's startup. Can you tell us a little bit about Plain Perfect and how you got involved with them?
So I was one of the co-founders of Plain Perfect, and my partner, Chris Thompson, and I, 10 or 12 years ago, were looking for a project to do with each other. And we brainstormed for quite a while, for a year or more, trying to figure out what we could do that would satisfy the itch that we were trying to scratch of doing something in aviation. Chris has worked in fleet management and limousines for a long time and keeps a absolutely immaculate Cessna 195 in showroom condition. So it's a beautiful plane, and he is a detailing maniac as a result of having a day job that has VIPs using his gear. So he calls me one day and he says, you know what? I know what we should do. We should figure out how to make chemicals that are safe for aviation, but effective. Because people are out there now using stuff that they buy at a supermarket that's super alkaline, and alkalinity and aluminum don't get along real well. How do we make stuff that actually is safe to use in an aviation environment? So that was the starting point. So we developed a line of products that is safe and effective. Some of the stuff that we've got out there is just absolute, or that they have out there now. It's super effective because of that attention to detail and because of somebody, Chris, wanting to have his Cessna 195 look absolutely perfect. So now fast forward 8 years or so, and I'm living in Mexico and not really able to do as much work on the company as I should as a partner. So Chris bought me out of the company. So what you're seeing on the channel when I say that Playing Perfect is a sponsor is a sincere sponsorship. So when I say something good about their products, it's because I believe in their products. I'm not making a nickel on that company anymore. I'm completely divested. The only reason I have a relationship with them anymore is because of my belief that they're making the best stuff out there in an aviation marketplace. So yeah, they've got a full suite of products. They're constantly improving and coming out with new stuff. And yeah, I'm glad to have them on board as a sponsor.
But I really like your ad for them where you put the bottle of the one cleaner on your cowl, spray it, wipe it down, and put it on again, and it won't even stay on because it's that effective of a product.
Yeah, and as with any good advertisement, that came from a real life experience. So in that spot, I say I'm supposed to be shooting this ad, and I was going to show the bottle before and show the bottle after, and I couldn't do it because the bottle. That's actually what happened that day. So I was going to show the reflection of the bottle in the paint, and kept putting it up there, and I couldn't get it to stay on there. So I'm like, all right, guess what? We're going a different direction with this ad.
So we kind of let the cat out of the bag a little bit with the fly-in because we haven't actually formally announced yet. But Rich, you've been kind enough to open up your home airport, the Tri-County Regional Lone Rock Airport, for our Flying Midwest podcast fly-in. I don't know if that's what we're actually calling it, but basically a gathering of Midwest aviators. Can you tell us a little bit about your home airport, what people that are coming can expect, and what we might have in the works?
Yeah, I mean, I'm calling it the Rich Wellner fly-in. You guys can call it whatever.
Perfect. It's done.
But yeah, that's the idea. Is we're gonna in August host an event at the Lone Rock Airport and see if we can get a little community of people. We've got a nice environment there. We've got 2 runways. Unfortunately, they're paved, but people can land either north, south, or east, west. We've got a big green area where people can camp. If we get enough people, we're going to get the restaurant there to stay open and do some dinner service for us. And we're going to have the mechanics that I talked about, the Johnson brothers. They're going to do a little walkthrough and maybe a little bit of a tutorial on fabric, on being an A&P, on basically what it takes to be a mechanic in this industry. So we're doing this with the support of the Tri-County Airport. The manager there was enthusiastic about wanting to do something like this. So we appreciate their support. And between that and doing a maintenance workshop and food and camping and probably set up a warming fire, I think it's going to be a fun little weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be a great time, I think. I'm looking forward to it. I heard something about a compound butter. I don't know.
I heard compound butter, ribeyes, and then grilled cheese. Yeah.
Grilled cheese.
Grilled cheese.
Grilled cheese.
If we don't have a high enough attendance to justify the restaurant being open for dinner, does that mean we get to put your services to work and you're cooking dinner for all of us?
We are going to make sure that people get fed regardless of what surface we need to cook on.
There you go.
We absolutely appreciate your generosity and kindness and being willing to host us and help us organize. So for all of our listeners, if you're interested in joining us, it's August 23rd through the 25th at the Lone Rock Airport. The identifiers Kilo, Lima, November, Romeo. And come for the whole weekend. Come for just a day if you can. We'd love to see you. The best way to get in touch with us will be on our Discord channel. We have an event in there, and we'll share some more details about how to get that link at the end of the episode.
Well, Maddie, I think it might be about that time.
I like how this is kind of just defaulted to me because I get so excited about this one event, the entire episode. I think it is time. So, Rich, I know you said one earlier, but now it is time to really crank up the heat. What is your aviation unpopular opinion?
I don't think I've heard this part of the show before.
No.
Is it always at the end? I haven't been sticking it in.
You got to listen to the whole thing, man.
Oh.
Yeah, I think that's an easy one. So more technology is more better. So I think ADS-B and radios should be requirements.
Ooh, that is spicy.
You're gonna upset the Piper Cub.
They're entirely capable of getting battery-powered radios.
Yeah. Handheld are what, $200?
Yeah, and they're decent now, not 1985 anymore.
Well, some people don't know that. To be fair, the FAA doesn't know that either. So yeah, we can't give him too.
I don't think that'll upset too many Piper Cub people, though, because they don't have electricity in their planes. They can't hear our podcasts anyways, so.
Yeah, they probably don't have the internet.
I don't even know this is happening. Yeah.
Oh, we're going to get roasted. So for those who are not as familiar with your channel as we are, where can they find your YouTube channel and where can they find the products we just talked about?
Yeah, so people want to find me. I'm easy to find. My name is Rich Wellner. Google me. I did this yesterday in incognito mode, and the first page of results is me on YouTube, me on Facebook, me on Instagram, me. And the same for Plane Perfect. Plane Perfect, Google them. It's planeperfect.us is their URL. They do also sell through Amazon and places like that. But yeah, they and I are very easy to find. My main social is YouTube. That's my jam, is going out, flying, camping, and cooking, and then making videos about it. So if you want to see the most current stuff and the most interesting stuff, you're going to find it on YouTube. And then I publish shorts and reels and photos and things like that on some of the other social.
Well, Rich, we cannot thank you enough for coming on. It's been a pleasure having you chat with us tonight on the podcast. I've enjoyed your channel for a while. I've had the great opportunity to meet you a few times, and it's always a pleasure, sir.
Yeah, appreciate it. It was great to visit with you guys.
Well, thank you very much to Mr. Rich Wellner for joining us on this episode of the Flying Midwest podcast and for helping us share some exciting news coming up.
Yeah, so as a reminder, Friday, August 23rd through Sunday, August 25th, we are doing our first ever Flying Midwest podcast fly-in, graciously hosted by Rich Wellner and the Lone Rock Airport.
Thanks.
We will. Thank you. Yeah, we will. Yeah. We're working on a bunch of different things, like Rich said. Of course, Sam's Diner is on the field, so we'll have ample opportunity for breakfast there and hanging out with other Midwest aviation enthusiasts, pilots, and you don't even have to be from the Midwest. If you're from, I don't know, like Texas or something like that, you're still more than welcome to join.
That's a very specific example.
Brian Turner.
Just throwing down the gauntlet, huh?
Yeah.
Right. Fair enough.
Well, he's been doing a series about making long distance flights for pointless missions, and I can't think of much more pointless than hanging out with us.
I think I have it on good authority. He might be getting pretty close, but I don't want to say too much more.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much to Rich and the Lone Rock Airport for inviting us at the end of August. And as always, the best way to stay updated and apprised of all the goings on with all of that is in our Discord server. So you know what to do. Send an email, flyingmidwestpodcast@gmail.com. Get a link to the Discord server so you can be in all the happenings, all the know, and all of the great updates for the first ever, hopefully of many, Flying Midwest Podcast fly-ins.
Hey, Jim, this has been fun. However, I'm sure the people are dying to know. What's on the
I'm
next
sure they are. Next episode, we're happy to welcome back Dick Napinski, the Director of Communications with AirVenture and EAA. We will talk all about the cool things that are coming up this year at AirVenture, where hopefully all of us will be there throughout parts of the week. So I'm excited to hear the cool things that they plan on putting on this year. And Dick assures me he's got lots of stuff to talk about. So you want to check that episode out and help get your plans ready for Oshkosh.
I will be there the whole week.
Sweet.
My dad will be there the whole week.
I'll go hang
I'll
out.
tell you what, your dad can come hang out with us. We'll
Go
record
hang out
with
with
your
my
dad. He'll just stand in for you. No one will be any wiser. He's going to have to speak in a
No,
little bit of a
he's so
higher
funny.
voice, though.
It's okay. We have like the same sense of humor, so it's
Perfect.
Perfect.
Well, if
We
you
will do
can't
it.
make it, I'm going to put that out there for real. Your dad should be your stand-in. Just
Oh,
throwing it out there.
absolutely. I think he's
All
the
right.
game.
As long as we're talking Oshkosh for just a quick second, we'll also try to schedule a couple of different opportunities for some meet and greet stuff, as well as some live recording. We did some live recording last year. It didn't work super awesome, so we're going to try a couple different things this year as far as equipment and see if we can't get something rocking and rolling to at least record one live thing with possible listeners as guests.
Hey, Jim, if somebody's never been to Oshkosh before and they want to know what to look forward to, what they should be excited for from people that have been there, what would be a good way they could learn about the experience?
YouTube. That's a great question, because the episode after Dick Napinski is typically our AirVenture Extravaganza Spectacular Extraordinaire, or however many other weird, like, awesome words we can throw in there, where we will bring in all sorts of listeners, former guests, to talk about their favorite parts of AirVenture, what they're looking forward to this year. Just really get us all pumped up for the big event this year. So the next 2 episodes will be fairly Oshkosh centered. And then after that, Oshkosh content for days. If you're interested in being in the Extravaganza Spectacular Extraordinaire, whatever else we're going to call it, shoot us a message on any of our social medias or reach out to us, flyingmidwestpodcast@gmail.com. And we would love to have some of our listeners talk to us about their AirVenture experiences and what they're looking forward to. So come one, come all. We'll try to get as many people in as we can and get you on the program.
And if you do a good enough job, they might rope you into being one of the co-hosts in the podcast.
You just have to really weirdly stalk us for the entirety of Oshkosh, and maybe we'll be in.
Yeah, just keep in mind, if this doesn't work out with Badger, that's how we got him in the first place. So you too could be a host.
They're always looking for my replacement.
Should we, we're going to get out of here? What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, as always, thank you everybody for listening to another episode of the Flying Midwest Podcast. You know the drill. Check us out on all the social medias, like, rate, review, all that good stuff. And until next time,
see ya.
See ya.
Through. Did you hear Hannah?
Yeah.
I sure heard her.
That was so cute.
You're going to have to keep that in there.
Oh, yeah.
Flight 536, contact Minneapolis Center 132.35 today.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Flying Midwest Podcast. Until next time, podcast service terminated, squawk VFR, frequency change approved. Good day.
So, what do we got going on, guys? And gal?
Are you implying that I take up the space of multiple guys?
I wasn't, but now that you mention it, I mean, I've talked to you about that.
Well, then,
Okay, never mind.
no, you go.
It is Maddie's
I'm
turn.
going to say, I was deviating.
I was going to say your thing because I don't have the show notes up and I don't realize it's your turn.
Badger, no.
Why do we even have show notes if you're not going to have them up? Just north of the Richard Bong Airport. I'm sorry, I had that wrong. Just west of the Richard... Damn it, I got it wrong again. East. My other west. All right, that's going to the bloopers. Taking your friend's phone, adding us on their podcast player, and spreading the word. Are you laughing at me?
Yep. She sure is.
She's like, what a nerd.
Stellantis. They make... Who... What do they make? I'm trying to remember what they own.
Oh, Stellantis is not a brand to scoff at. They make DS automobiles, Lancia, Maserati, Alfa Romeo, and Jeep.
Jeep. Yeah, that's right.
Wait, did we just go from Maserati to Jeep?
We sure did.
We've got this Maserati, and now over here we have this Jeep Wrangler.
Well, anyways, they're partnering with Archer for EV tolls, so maybe someday we'll see an EV toll Jeep.
No!
Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for our April Fool's episode next year.
Oh my gosh, I'm writing that down. I'm writing it down. EV toll Jeep. Moving to Pequot, Ohio. I'm probably saying that wrong. It might be Pica, but I'm calling it Pequot. It's Ohio. It's
Sorry, I'm going to be processing a little bit slow tonight, including when I talk. So just fair warning. If I say something dumb, it's normal, but you know.
I was going to say it's normal.